So I'm here to talk about, really in the end, planning is about forecasting, because every plan talks about the future. And you have to think really hard about what the future is going to look like. So I've actually more recently come more back to the core profession of planning after my wandering through different lives in government and more natural resource management. So metro planning, and I'm going to talk a lot about metro planning because we've done work with the metro region panel. Brad himself was on the panel, and we did some of the analytical work behind that. And we did, and that was done quite recently this year. And over the last few years, we've done a lot of work as well for the Calgary Regional Partnership. So I'm going to use those two examples, kind of on how we've used some tools. And I'd like your ideas about other tools to help inform planning and help inform decision making. So really the core question that we're always asking is how can we analyze information to project futures for effective planning? And I think it's a core question of any planning decision. And more, I think you'll find, and I think you know, the planning profession is being asked more and more questions in the scope of this plan. And I haven't done this exercise, but I bet if somebody did, you go back and look at the scope of a regional plan 40 years ago. It was a lot smaller than the scope of the regional plan that you're dealing with today. Because new issues, take climate change for example, that are being addressed, that weren't addressed even 20 years ago in regional plans. This is an example of within the modeling work that we do with the ALCES. These are some of the relationships that we model and we've developed that we're using within municipalities in the work across Western Canada, and actually more of the work within the group is being done in Australia now than in Canada, because they've really embraced it for their municipal planning work. So this gives you an idea of the relationship about whether it's natural flood, drought, frequency change, whether it's fiscal sustainability, the cost of your planning decisions, whether it's healthcare costs. For example, we're doing some work here in Edmonton with the United Way and the Edmonton Community Foundation on healthcare, social service cost modeling around some of those issues. Or whether it's the loss of natural landscape or transportation costs. There's a whole number of factors, and I think each of you sit within the planning profession. You may look at a sample, or if you're fortunate, you can look at all of these in the broader question. As well, from a different land use perspective, you're looking at many different land use types of conservation, whether it's forestry, industry, Aboriginal groups, or human population change. And you're looking at different natural landscape dynamics, climate change, carbon pool dynamics, wildlife habitat, natural disturbance regimes. Calgary's seen the floods, Fort McMurray's seen the fires. I mean, these kinds of things are becoming more and more important as you think about what your plan should look like. So at the core, planning requires visual tools because we work with people, and not everyone likes looking at an Excel spreadsheet. Most of the work we could do could come back to numbers, but you lose people pretty quickly. So the GIS profession and the mapping profession has been very good at that. When I went to, I won't tell you how old I am, but this will tell you how old I am. When I went to planning school, we were given a sheet on the first day about what we needed to buy. And the first thing on the sheet was felt pens. Because that's how we worked in the Ian McCard days of felt pen overlays. And that's how we did our mapping, with felt pens and plastic. And that's how we did it. And then the second sheet we got was booking time for the mainframe computer. And we were all happy because we got 4 o'clock in the morning instead of 2 o'clock in the morning. But that's, that's the way we work, and that's how we started out. If you look at GIS today, I mean, that just looks to me like somebody had a really good felt pencil. GIS is really good about visualizing data so people can see it. And when you work with your decision makers, you work within your profession, you work with the public, it's a very effective tool about communicating what the issue is, what the challenge is, what the result of the decision is. So these are classic maps of, here's some examples: soil groupings, wetland areas. These are heat maps, recreation networks. You've all seen these kind of maps that help inform decision making going forward. But the real challenge is, how do you go from that, from really good maps, really good GIS, to show how change will happen and ask questions about what will this area look like if the climate changes by 2 degrees, if the flood regime in our valley changes. Calgary, we always think that. These kinds of questions, if population grows at a high level or at a low level, or as planners, you use your policy levers. If we increase density, or if we don't increase density, if we put in more transit, or if we don't, we put in wider roads and other. These are the kinds of questions you can explore through modeling. So we were asked, Brad was appointed to as one of the panel members of the Edmonton Metro panel, and during that work, they said, Chief, can you run some of these questions and simulate and model some of these questions? So we were hired to do this work with the Metro. So obviously the Edmonton Metro region, I'm sure you're all familiar with, but the challenge of the Metro panel was, how do they build an integrated greater metro region? With residential footprints, energy, hard infrastructure footprints, social infrastructure, natural capital, I'm talking water, trees, air, land, transportation, education, health, agriculture, and food. A lot of questions, not easy to solve, and I don't think we solve them either, but it's just, you understand the scope of all of these questions that need to be dealt with. And as well, as you know, there's always many stakeholders in these. The broader the region, the more stakeholders you have generally, and they have competing interests. And so how do you find a way to bring information together so many interests can make effective decisions? It's not, really you need to find a tool to do that. So the core question, another core question that we came back to is, what kind of planning trajectories lead to the most desired region? So what kind of planning outcomes are you looking for? So we've seen the history here since, Fort Edmonton and the settlement, human settlement came and changed sort of the pre-Aboriginal landscape from the mid-1800s to today. And then the question becomes, from today forward, what kind of futures might you see? So we have, within the modeling work that we do, we help build and assess alternative futures. So the work that we did for the panel was over a 50-year period. That was kind of our scope, which is a broad, long-term period. It's a lot broader than a 10-year municipal development plan kind of concept. But it helps think about integrating decisions over a broader time. I talked earlier about the traditional tools of GIS are very helpful and very effective. The ALCES tool it's a dynamic, it's a stock and flow. People know what that is. It's a Stella-based stock and flow simulator that simulates change and forecasts change over time. And it uses GIS information as well. And it's based on a computer, access to the internet, it runs the browser, and it has no other applications. And that's how it works. And it provides all kinds of outputs because it's data, and data can be manifest itself in many different ways, from an Excel spreadsheet to a chart to a visual diagram to a 3D map, and we can run videos and sequences over time. So back to the Edmonton Metro region. So really, when one thinks about how you model the future and what kinds of questions you ask, you need to understand the basic drivers. And the first one, other than the existing core natural chapter that you have, and those dynamics, is population growth. So how fast is Edmonton going to grow? And that will drive residential area, residential footprint, all the questions about what kind of densities and where you have. And that drives effects and changes on cropland, natural area, transportation network, cost of infrastructure, social infrastructure, and many other factors. But this is a simple logic. It's a simple logic diagram, not like the complex one I showed earlier, about some of the effects of each one of these has a decision and has an effect between them. So within the capital region, we did a number of analyses, and I'm not going to show them all to you, but I'm just going to show you some. Really, for the metro panel, we did a high growth and low growth, high and low population growth forecast based on the low priority growth area density targets and the increase at the time, because they haven't approved them all yet, the increased growth plan density targets. So we looked at high and low population growth and the existing priority growth area density targets and then the new ones that were being proposed at the time when this work was done. So just some of the factors, because I can get lost in the data and I'll probably lose myself, so I won't go that far. But really, over a 50-year period, we're talking about a more than doubling of the metro region in population. We're talking, these forecasts are based on a build-out, based on the developable land that is there and the plan status is there, about what plans have already approved. So we forecast based on existing land base and existing plan decisions. And we did a low density and a high density forecast. So I'll give you 2 or 3 kind of examples of the results we came with. So from a settlement footprint point of view, if you compare the existing priority growth area targets with the increased density targets, you're looking, the increased density targets looks at a settlement footprint of 1,988 square kilometers of land in 50 years. If you take the existing or priority growth area targets, you're looking at 2,739 kilometers of land. So the overall settlement footprint. So the impact, this gives you an idea about how you can forecast the impact, the footprint impact on the land. I'll show you with maps in a video in a minute, on the land over time. So this shows, I'm just going to click through 10-year horizons. So red obviously is, in this case, is the settlement footprint going forward 10 years from 2015. And just showing how that footprint kind of changes over time to 2064. That was, the one was a low density and the other one is increased density. So this is all mapped out on that, and I'm going to run a video in a minute. From a farmland point of view, the question is, well, how much cropland, farmland, is lost as a result of this planning decision? So we can model that out. So with an increased density target, 500 square kilometers of land is lost in 50 years. With a low density target, you're talking about a loss of 877 square kilometers of land. So quite a difference in the impact of the type of policy decision the decision makers come up with. And same thing, this case here, this is, I think this is counterintuitive because the red is actually the farmland. So think Canadian red wheat when you're looking at this. So the low density, you can see the loss of farmland over 50 years with the low density targets. And with the increased density targets, it's a slightly less loss of land. The other thing, and then this is the last indicator I'm going to talk to you about. The other thing we did is the cost. So we're not just focused on the land, we're focused on the cost because, as you know, when you're in the decision room with the decider, one of the big factors is how much does this cost. So we worked with the City of Edmonton is a great group that manages infrastructure costs. So we used their data sets because they did a survey about 3 or 4 years ago about the development costs of neighborhoods, and we used their average data set, and we rolled that out across all the future development areas based on the plans and based on the priority growth areas, and calculated the cost if they were going to use a low density or a higher density basis. The difference of increased density versus low density is about $29 billion over 50 years. So that's the infrastructure roads, sewers, water, those factors. So this is simply modeling the cost of building on land over time based on the type of land development you project. So I'm going to run some, this is our online simulator, and I'm going to run a number of different variables here showing how the landscape will change. So we did two things here. We backcast to 1910 because that's where, before 1910, the data sets we don't think are reliable enough to use. So we do a lot of backcasting as well about reconstructing the landscape. And some people say, well, why do you do that? Because planning's for the future. Well, if you're more in the natural capital world or looking at wetlands or looking at farmland, it's really important to understand what the landscape looks like because you're planning based on how a landscape and how an environment functions, not just how a human neighborhood functions. So we backcast, and a lot of that work was done with the Land Use Secretariat because they need to know how the landscape has changed because sometimes you're remediating areas to bring it more back to what it looked like. And then we forecast to 2065. So this first one shows, starting in 1910, how the residential footprint in the area has grown. And then it will pause at 1910, or 2010. So this is 2010, so roughly current day residential footprint. So if you take the existing capital region growth plan and project the residential footprint on this through this heat map, this shows what it will look like in how it will grow out to 2065. It's a pretty cool little visualization. So that's residential area. Another factor that can be used for analysis is the energy sector footprint. So we go back to 2010, you can look at the Pembina, Drayton Valley, the Duke area, and up in Fort Saskatchewan and the fields in Bruderheim, and you can see that grow from 1910 to today. And then you can project based on existing understanding of the oil and gas reserves and the development of that over time. So this starts in 1910 and then it grows the footprint forward. As Leduc comes on, Bruderheim, Headwater comes on, and those different areas. And you can see the hot area, obviously, where all the shale development is happening now. So if you go forward, you go more towards the foothills. You can see that this is the density of the energy sector footprint. This one is cropland. This is interesting to see. Cropland's interesting to see because you can see how cropland is disappearing over time. First of all, it grows quickly around Edmonton, and then as Edmonton grows, it slowly disappears. Cropland over time within the area. That's 2010 now, stopping. So if you take that forward into 2060, the cropland slowly diminishes. Over probably some of the best soil in Alberta, the black chernozems. And if you look at overall footprint, take the total footprint, so the total anthropogenic footprint over time, this runs it from, again, it's going to run it from 1910 to 2010 and then forward for another 50 years. All this is doing is it's taking known data on cells and projecting it on a map over time, and then it just runs it as a video. So that's the total footprint of time. And then this is landscape, or natural area landscape connectivity for those that are more involved in the natural landscape, a very important index about the health of flora, fauna, water, air. Okay, I think you're probably going to get tired of videos, so I think I'll skip over that. But that gives you a good summary of the kind of analysis that we have started to do with the ALCES tools as we've taken it from the broader landscape world, because I met Brad first because I used to be quite involved in the forestry world. We used to use it at that broad landscape level. Now the question is, he's asked me to help him work with the municipal world, in the planning world, and I'm coming back to the planning profession. So I've got questions for you, and I know you might have questions for me, is how can we use this to help make informed planning in a better way? And there's some really interesting things. Some of this work we're doing with the United Way here, I find fascinating, around figuring out population, age, demographic, family structure, urban neighborhood location and social service location. So we're starting to model those correlations to help social service agencies make better decisions on location and impact. And I think, and we're just in the middle of that, scratching our head on how to make it work. But I mean, there's some really, with the data that's available today and the types of tools for forecasting, I think is very effective for planning. I think it has a lot of potential. We're working with the province now on a housing strategy. And when you think about the location of housing, affordable housing, how you sort through that, it's, as you know, as you plan out your neighborhoods, you think about mixed-use development, you think about where you put social housing, you talk about the density of housing, the locational issues, and forecasting how the population and the age of the neighborhood is going to change over time. I think these are great tools to think about how you do that planning. So we did this work as well. We finished this a couple of years ago with the Calgary Regional Partnership, and there's a number of published works on that. I wasn't involved with this work, but their team was. So this work as well, and the municipalities in the Calgary Regional Partnership are now using this simulator for some of their work. But you can find that. I'll just run this one little video. So this compares, this was the decision process the mayors of that partnership went through. So this compares BAU, business as usual, versus the metropolitan plan. So this compares the comparison it compares the total settlement footprint area over time, and it just shows you running the model, I think, right about now. So it shows the grow out in Calgary, versus one is business as usual, and the other one is it allows you to, using models like this, you can run scenarios. I came in when they were just finishing their process with this, but what we found very effective was, a number of planners, you run meetings with people, you run design charrettes, you run different types of processes to engage people, whether they be decision makers or whether they be community members. And the question is, what information do you bring to the table? Tools like this that help show how a neighborhood can change over time, or some of the questions that can change over time, I think have the potential to really inform that process. So you have to be careful about how you use the data, and you don't want to overwhelm people, but I think they can really bring in a lot of potential uses for that.